Hogwarts Legacy offers an unprecedented video game experience of the wizarding world, but some of the music sounds less John Williams and more John Powell.
I was wondering if you could play that song again.
Which one, man?
The one that goes...
No, man, you're thinking of...
The two tracks are Lord of the Shore for riding the Grap Horn in Hogwarts Legacy, and Test Drive, the culmination of the flying theme in How to Train Your Dragon. Let's look at what's the same.
Coincidence? I think not!
What this actually reminds me of is the music composed for the How to Train Your Dragon 2 game, where some tracks are pulled straight from the first movie, and some new ones are clearly built off of Test Drive, using the same themes and orchestration, but go in a different direction. Is it the same people? I've checked the game's booklet and the credits, but I don't see any for music, which I guess is another issue. But this got me thinking, do video games have temp tracks? I'd never really thought about that before. A temp track is a temporary music track placed in editing before the score is written to give a sense of tone and pace. But temp tracks can create plenty of other issues, and if the new track is very similar to the temp, it can lead to lawsuits. In a previous video, I showed how a temp track was used to inspire one of How to Train Your Dragon's most famous tracks, Forbidden Friendship. This was going to be the actual track until John Powell convinced the directors to let him write something inspired by the temp, but better suited to the scene. But the rest of the score is original. Is Hogwarts Legacy the same story? One track that's very similar and the rest original? And who did this? The game actually has a few composers, and I'm not sure which one's credited for this track, but the lead composer is Chuck E. Myers C., and another is J. Scott Riccozzi, who studied the music of John Williams and John Powell, among other composers. The composers are clearly very passionate and honored to be working on this project, working with John Williams' music to build on it.
It's just the most amazing project and the most amazing team of people. I can't believe all the incredible people that are making this whole vision come to life. The brilliance of John Williams' Hedwig's theme. He hadn't even seen the movie and he wrote that incredible piece of music.
As for the track, we don't know who's most responsible. This could have been all one composer leaning too close to the inspiration. Or it's possible his boss heard Test Drive, or it was in the temp and he just said, yes, do this, which does happen with temp tracks, which can lead to lawsuits. But is it different enough? It's worth mentioning Lord of the Shore does have an original melody after the ostinato, but it's kind of overshadowed by everything else. One difference I noticed is quality, because it's not real. It has slightly less oomph, because it's not a real orchestra, unlike other tracks in the game, which kind of makes it feel like one of the many Test Drive covers out there. Or a parody video where the music is just different enough, which is fine because that's parody. I wonder if it's a coincidence this track was never recorded. Maybe there were scheduling or budget issues, or maybe this was a late addition that just leaned too heavily on something else. There's also a difference in function. One is film music that has to sync just right with the action, and one is a video game where the action in the gameplay is unpredictable. It's up to the player. And yet, it has a lot of the same changes as Test Drive. And one is a ride, but not a flight, which makes it a little strange they borrowed from a track specifically written to emulate flying. And it's weird that of all original tracks in the score, this one sounds the most like a pre-existing one, which is also from a totally separate series, written by a non-Harry Potter composer, which is also owned by a different studio. But it's more complicated. There was a distribution merger of Warner Brothers and Universal in 2020, so does that change any potential copyright issues? Could they have done the E.T. flying theme or Jurassic Park if they wanted, even though the companies are still technically separate? I'm sure John Powell doesn't know about this, and I'm not sure how he'd feel. I asked around about Hogwarts Legacy and found out it does directly quote some Harry Potter music, specifically Harry's Wondrous World when the castle is introduced, and Hedwig's theme throughout the game. But does this track even work? Outside of the obvious, I do have a critique. Test Drive brings that power needed for this thing, but for such a large, stampeding, flightless beast, should it sound as graceful as Test Drive? I guess that's the magic element, but again, this isn't a flight. Off the top of my head, here's some actual Harry Potter music that I think could be a better fit. So the good news is, if you want to ride a magical creature with Test Drive playing, you basically can. But going back to that ostinato, it's important. Some people call it Toothless's theme. Technically it's not, it's the flying ostinato. A theme for both main characters and their bond, their story, woven throughout the whole score, of the whole series. I consider it the backbone of the score. So is this borderline plagiarizing a major part of another score? Not just a cue, but a major theme? The first half of the Lord of the Shore ostinato is the same thing, just in a different key, which How to Train Your Dragon probably also does somewhere because it plays in so many variations across the series, or even just in one movie. If you copied the James Bond guitar riff and barely changed it, not just the notes, but the style and everything, everyone would notice because it's famous, but it's also a major part of the series' music. It's the James Bond theme. It's not just the opening cue in this one movie, it's everywhere. I think there's nothing wrong with using Test Drive as an inspiration, but whatever the circumstances were that led to Lord of the Shore, they probably should have just kept the general tone and orchestration instead of copying the start, and then the changes, and then the middle, and almost everything else. Now going back to this clip,
I was wondering if you could play that song again.
neither of these is actually a song. A song is a piece of music with lyrics, but almost no one knows that and uses it right, because there's a lot most people don't know about film music, which is why I'm making a video about film music basics. So subscribe to find out what else you don't know, and check out my video on what Test Drive has in common with an actual John Williams theme. Thanks for watching.